Welcome back to Divulgence, everybody. Today we have Michael King back in the house. What's going on, Mike? How are you, my friend?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Doing good, man. Doing good. Thanks so much for being here. We also have Hasberg Jolly West in the house. Hasberg, what's going on, brother? So happy to have you.
No, not much, man. Good to be here, man. Thanks, Jordan.
Well, we got a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world, obviously, with war and Epstein and all that stuff. But Mike, you've got something completely different for us today. So why don't you just start by introducing us to what you'd like to present today?
Well, all right. So to preface this, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of issues going on in the world. And, that worldview and having grounding becomes very important because, like, if you don't have grounding, you don't have community, and now more and more people are isolated, especially in times like this, you have a recipe for psychosis. And this is where I think current events sort of aligns with my overlapping interests on philosophy, worldview, but also conspiratorial hierarchies. So with what I'm going to be presenting, I'm going to be actually critiquing a lot of former beliefs that I used to have or methods I used to fall into that would actually lead to psychosis. I'm not going to get into the story, but back in 2019, I have actually walked into a psychosis, and I have personally seen people in the truther space walk into psychosis and pretty much ruin their lives and like alienate themselves from their family because they accept a lot of these conspiracy narratives. So what I want to do is I want to get into the history of that, but also correct it because a couple years ago, like around 2022, when I started coming across some of these researchers, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so profound. I got to post it. Oh my gosh, look, there's all this compelling evidence. But little did I realize that a lot of this stuff is based on forgeries or misrepresentation that gets repeated. So there's a lot of scholarship where there's claims of this stuff. So you have this massive body of literature of people saying things, but that doesn't mean it's true. And if like they're talking about ancient history or ancient religion, for instance, but then once you look at ancient history and religion, you can only find snippets of evidence, but there's like, it's not really a compelling picture. There's not much to back it up. Well, that's obviously BS, and people shouldn't be like spinning their wheels on it. And where I have an issue now is people are basing their entire worldviews off this. So that combined with these events is kind of like making them spin their wheels. It's redirecting their productivity. It's isolating them from communities that could actually provide solutions. So that's why that's what I want to address and why I'm interested in this.
Okay, well, that sounds interesting. Like, especially with, now that the technology's upgraded, we have all this AI. You have just even more misconception and misrepresentation, and you almost have to question just about everything these days. So yeah, that sounds great, man. So where do we begin, friend? Where do we begin?
So if you go into the conspiracy space, I know you're somewhat familiar with it, and you're definitely pretty knowledgeable. And there, honestly, it's like I think if you have a conspiracy mindset at this point, I think you're better trashing the conspiracy books and just going for more like quote unquote mainstream sources. If you do detective work, you can find plenty of stuff there, but when you start getting into this, there's a lot of books being recommended, and one of the two go-to ones that sort of frame people's perspectives on conspiracies is Alex Hislop's Tale of Two Babylons and also Bill Cooper's Mystery Babylon. So Hislop's Tale of Two Babylons, it's directed more at like Catholic Church conspiracies, Vatican conspiracies, but it ends up getting repeated by people who aren't really coming at it from that angle. And a big reason for that is because of Bill Cooper. So Bill Cooper, he gets a lot of things on contemporary history right. So Bill Cooper's claim to fame, I'd be surprised if both of you guys don't know this, but his main claim to fame was anticipating 9/11 ahead of 9/11, then having the IRS come and kill him after he exposed it ahead of time. And Alex Jones goes and takes his credit. So it's like, I'm not saying everything these people say is incorrect, but they definitely make some errors, and that stuff gets repeated and ends up forming a completely different worldview, and people don't even realize that they're accepting it, is where I'm getting at. So that doesn't mean trash everything these people say, but just be careful. And like, just because something has a really compelling narrative, that doesn't mean that it's true and that you should go around repeating it.
True, man. Excuse me. True. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I might add, Bill Cooper has Masonic connections, and he was like naval intelligence also. In fact, one of his like, oh yeah, well, like I know all this stuff because I have top secret document. It's because he was a Fed. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and he also like was DeMolay. I mean, he talks about, you know, like that's how he got into ONI, was because he put on his application that he was DeMolay.
What's DeMolay?
DeMolay is like Freemasonry for like,
okay,
for like kids, for like high school age boys.
Okay.
The, you know, Order of DeMolay, but that, like, he, you know, he's pretty, you know, upfront about that he was DeMolay, and that's like, that was his pathway, you know, into getting into ONI. So yeah, I mean, Cooper's interesting. I mean, I think like that, you know, I think like what Mike was saying, you know, kind of like at the end of his life, you know, that there was, you know, some more interesting things going on, and then maybe, you know, he had like gotten to a point where he was kind of back, you know, walking back some of the stuff that he had been like putting out, some of the propaganda, and you know, I'm sure we'll get there, but I'll give Mike the floor and, you know, let him, you know, go where he wants to go.
Well, like, so particularly where I'm coming from, so I talked about walking into a psychosis myself. What brought me out of that was the overall Christian worldview, and I saw how like the whole meta narrative connected to theory of knowledge, and it was all supported by metaphysics, how there was like this, everything was coherent, there's a sense of purpose. So I'm definitely going to be advocating for that. And you know, I'm gonna be getting into where Bill Cooper and Alex Hislop get a lot of their speculations from. So just for starters, be doing that. I'm going to be getting a lot of this from the Masoretic text. And by the way, like, there are some other people who have been doing similar scholarship. It's like, if you want people who are so one source that like corresponds Egyptology with the kind of history you see in Genesis, there's a documentary called Patterns of Evidence. There's also Doug Petrovich, who does a pretty good job at proving that Sargon of Akkad is actually Nimrod from Genesis. Now, I think he gets things right because he pushes Nimrod back to like only about a century after the flood. But if there's a giant flood and it wipes out like the population, it doesn't make sense. There's going to be a lot of people coming together that early on. I'd actually say that I'll actually go ahead and say this now, but I'll be building up to this too. I don't think that the Tower of Babel actually happened under Nimrod whatsoever. I think it actually happened under Hammurabi, like well after the flood. So I can get into that, but he ends up pushing back like the Tower of Babel like way too early for it to make sense if you end up going with that timeline of events. Then there's another guy called Aaron. I can't remember his last name, but I've had a couple interactions with him. I remember saying, "Hey, look, you're pursuing lines of evidence I have, but like you're talking about things I haven't considered, but it's pretty interesting." So he's when he writes this book, I'm going to be sharing it because it's going to back up the things that I'm saying. But he's writing a book called Serpent by the Way, and I was asking if he's had other citations addressing what he's talked about. He hasn't, but when he's done with that, hopefully this summer, I'll be sharing his stuff, and he's got some fascinating scholarship, and you know, essentially like why I'm bringing this up is because you know, if rather you're a Christian, Muslim, Jew, you know, for practicality. So I'm not giving like a pragmatic argument for religion. I'm not saying just because it's practical, therefore true, but it's like these traditions go way back, and the people who develop these traditions and these religious philosophies, not all of them are bad guys. They're not all like trying to manipulate the public. They're making psychological considerations for how to hold together a civilizational order. So if you go back through those timelines and you get sloppy about that, you're going to end up throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And if you're addressing like really fundamental concerns for humanity, and you have a really compelling, profound seeming narrative, but it's all incorrect trash, well, you kind of got a blueprint for a cult there, and a kind of framework that can end up driving people into psychosis. And that's the kind of thing I see coming out of these narratives, especially people who are like on social media all the time, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a sleuth, I'm going to research all this stuff. And they end up getting disconnected from families and communities and end up like not really having much anchoring into the real world. So yeah, that's why I see a big problem with this. So I'm going to be advocating for the Christian worldview. That I'm just being transparent with where I'm coming from, and specifically the timeline from the Masoretic text. So I'm just being clear on where I'm approaching this from. But for people who don't accept all that, I'd still say, like, if you want to tweak the timeline around events, there's still a lot of compelling, like, linguistic, archaeological evidence for what I'm saying. So, like, even if people don't share all my assumptions, there's definitely going to be things worth considering in this. So, I guess where I can start. Is so if we go with the hypothesis that Genesis is real history, then it would be safe to say that if that's what happened, then early humanity would actually believe that. All right. Now, if that's the case, it makes sense to, like, we know human nature. We know that governments and priesthoods work together to formulate propaganda for controlling and manipulating the population, but they'd have to get that from some kind of prior source material. So if the Genesis account is correct, like you'll see major components in the beginning. You will see God, you will see God speaking, you will see his word, and you will see a spirit. All right. And then you'll also see a serpent figure. So if that's correct, my hypothesis, because remember, like I was coming at this from a Christian worldview, so I started hearing these claims about, well, oh my gosh, what's the origins of Mystery Babylon? What's all this? So I was coming at it. All right, well, if that's the truth, I will expect to see figures that are based on a spirit figure, based on a word figure, or a son, based on a father figure, but also based on a serpent that you see in the book of Genesis. And then what you can expect later on is that those figures are going to be smashed into legendary figures that then get like passed down through a game of telephone. So then like you'll have gods, like you'll have certain aspects of God in Genesis being mixed together with certain legendary figures. Then later on that gets mixed and smashed together with later legendary figures and things like that. So the narrative that I want to push back on, though, so the narrative that comes out of Mystery Babylon by Bill Cooper, he's appropriating it from Alexander Hislop's Tale of Two Babylons. So Hislop didn't have this intention. Hislop was a Protestant who was writing anti-Catholic tracts. All right. And remember, like if you believe, there's a lot of conspiracies involving the Vatican. So that's where this can end up like getting people off guard. So the kind of assumption I would make is, well, there's conspiracies of the Vatican, therefore it's like, oh my gosh, it must all be like illegitimate. So he's making these claims like that they're pretty much the second Babylon, and that their entire like religious and metaphysical framework is derived from Babylonian religion. All right. But so he believes in like the Godhead as presented in like Genesis and later on the New Testament, where it's like spelled out more clearly. But he also ends up arguing that, like, well, the Catholic Trinity is different. So you have a Semiramis. Semiramis, that's like this harlot figure who was supposedly Nimrod's mother. And they go back like 4,000 or 5,000 years, and like they're responsible for creating this Babylonian empire. They're responsible for creating the archetypes for like paganism, and then that got appropriated in Egypt, and that got absorbed into Persia and Greece, and eventually made its way into Rome. And when Rome wanted to hijack Christianity, they use that blueprint. So you have they'll say the appropriation of the spirit is Semiramis, that Nimrod, they'll sometimes say that, because there's different takes on this, but a lot of this comes from Hislop. They'll sometimes say that Nimrod is either her son or her lover, or sometimes they'll say it's like an incestuous relationship. They're like, oh, look, like we know Emperor Nero is having affairs with Agrippa the Younger, his mother. So they'll try and like impose some of that on it. And what they'll say is Tammuz. Tammuz is this early like dying and rising god figure. All right, so Tammuz, there's in ancient like Babylonian mythology, they'd have a like a ceremony for the mourning of Tammuz, because like their version of the fertility goddess would mourn his death. So what they'll say is that's Semiramis, and that's also who the Catholic Jesus is based on. So Bill Cooper takes a step further. He pretty much claims that like the Trinity comes from these mystery schools, and that this Nimrodian religion based on these three figures, Nimrod's son, Jesus, Nimrod, who would be the father, and Semiramis, who would be the mother or the Holy Spirit, because oftentimes the Holy Spirit would be associated maternally. Now, my take on that is if you look in like the passages of the Bible, I'm not going to be getting into filioque stuff, because like the filioque is essentially a debate between Catholics and Orthodox on like, does the Spirit proceed from the Father and the Son, or does the Spirit and the Son both proceed from the Father? I'm not weighing in on that, but if you look at the like dynamics between the persons as laid out in Scripture, the Spirit does point to the Son. The Spirit wants to glorify the Son. The Spirit wants to glorify Jesus. So there is a sense in which the Spirit takes a lesser and subordinate role to both Jesus and the Father. So if you're looking at that dynamic, and there's some early traditions reflecting that going on, which might have been oral history, but we don't have record of it in Genesis, that's why I think that like the Spirit end up getting associated with womanhood, because like there's a sense of submission there, which is why the Spirit would be turned to these goddess figures. But you know, a big problem with that narrative about Semiramis, Nimrod, and Tammuz. Tammuz goes back 5,000 years ago. Tammuz is pre-flood. If you go with Masoretic timeline, then Nimrod would probably be around 1900 BC, or between 2100 and 1900. Now, people will date Sargon of Akkad around 2100. So I think that's Nimrod, but I put the date a little bit later than that, because what I think they're doing at this time is they are making stuff up. They're making stuff up and mixing together kings lists that would be dug up. Because remember, like these records would be on ceramic clay tablets. They would be able to survive waters and stuff. And the flood wasn't like just a bunch of giant tsunamis. It came from rain. So what I think they're doing is like you have like multiple lines of succession from different areas, and some of these are based on legendary figures who would end up being deified. So what they're doing is I think they're smashing together different like kings lists in different areas. So if there's a flood that's happening, there's about a 300-year period of rebuilding. And also, if you go with the biblical timelines, like remember the pre-flood people would have longer lifespans. Now, what I think that is I think you had changes in the atmospheric condition and also changes in the magnetic field, because the way that the earth is described before the flood, it's like you don't have the same kind of like hydraulic cycle that you see now, like because when it's talking about it raining, that's presented as like something entirely new. So I think there was a change that happened, and it also would have caused genetics to deteriorate a little bit. So, you'd have people declining in lifespan, but essentially Noah and his sons would still be alive a little bit longer. So they'd be living for a couple hundred years. So like they'd be keeping world peace essentially. So if someone comes along and starts conquering lands, be like, oh, look at this king's list. I'm descended from these people, and these people attacked me, so I'm justified in invading them and taking over these territories. They'd be alive, and they'd be able to call BS on that. So part of the reason why I'm dating Nimrod or Sargon of Akkad that far ahead is because it makes perfect sense that they'd be doing exactly that. Okay, so yeah, what it looks like happened is a lot of historians who talk about like ancient Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, they're going along with kings lists that have these dates, and I think it's a bunch of bullcrap propaganda. And if you look at the Elamite kings list and the Assyrians kings list, they actually talk about a flood. Okay, so what's interesting? I'll be getting into this later, but so it looks to me like Elam would have been along the Persian Gulf, and then it would have been pretty close to Lagash. It looks to me like before the flood, there was lower water levels, and this part of the Persian Gulf would have actually been joined. So once the first ever recorded battles end up coming from a city in southern Mesopotamia, right along the Persian Gulf, called Lagash. They're making weapons, and they're making things like that. It seems to me like, so if you look at like all these figures end up corresponding with like Genesis 5 figures. So what we know is, all right, for instance, we have records of like Tubal Cain being a metal worker and things like this, and we start seeing all these like this metalwork and wars coming from that area in Lagash. So if there's an Elamite kings list and they're digging up stuff from here, it makes sense that it would come from the line of Cain also. So what's interesting is from the line of Cain, you see 7 descendants in there, and they're talking about elites, because remember, Genesis talks about like Adam and Eve having other descendants. So like this is highlighting very like well-known and influential people for a reason. In the Elamite kings list, you have 7 in that order, and it lines up perfectly with the genealogy that you end up seeing in Genesis 5. Now, another interesting thing, I forgot. Shoot, I don't have this in front of me. I'm bad with other languages, but there's a way to translate the first ever recorded battle that's in the Lagash region as the border of Eden. There's a way to translate it as that. So what I think actually where Eden actually is, it's submerged under the Red Sea, and they were sort of fighting over that territory. And yeah, like Eden's pretty much submerged right now. But anyways, back to the timeline. Back to timeline of Nimrod is they're digging up. So all like these figures that you'll see in Genesis 5, they're famous and they're being deified. So essentially, they want to push back the date of the flood, so they can say like, oh well, we have this continuity of legitimacy. Also, we're descended from gods, so there we have our divine right of kings. It's directly mandated. Oh, but also because there's no flood, there wasn't this time of rebuilding. So we have records of this battle going on. See, you guys attacked us first, so we're justified in taking over your land. We're justified in taking you guys over. All right. And that would have been way back. So a problem with the theory that the Trinity's based on Semiramis, Tammuz, and Nimrod, just to bring it back to that, different timelines. All right. So one of the things that Hislop says, they'll go to passages in Ezekiel and the prophets who are writing around the time of the Assyrian invasions and Babylonian captivity. So they would have been writing after 800 BC. So they would have been writing about like 1,000 years after Nimrod, who I say Sargon of Akkad, would have existed. That's the first ever time you see anyone like Semiramis being mentioned. Now, she definitely is going to be based on like early fertility goddess figures, but like, they try and like push that back and superimpose on it. So where the sloppy scholarship comes in is, oh well, you have overlapping archetypes, therefore we can push back these dates. And Semiramis was actually a queen in Assyria. So that's why this doesn't work. It's like it makes sense. It makes sense that you'll have royalty being associated with these divine figures, but also this queen, she had an associate named Nemus. So what they'll say is this Nemus guy who she was sleeping with, see, that's Nimrod, because like, oh wow, look, there's some similar etymology there. But the problem is that those dates are like way too far apart, and there's absolutely no evidence of anyone fitting with the description of Tammuz they give existing at the same time. But you know what they'll say is like, oh, all this stuff was going on at the same time, and that's where we have all these metaphysics from, and it's all just like mystery Babylon repackaging occultism for religion. So you see why that's dangerous. Like all religion is just all illegitimate. Let's not look into the primary sources or investigate this. We have a grab bag of talking points to go to, so we can dismiss all this because it's illegitimate from this group of occultists controlling the world, right? Like this is Gnosticism. This is Gnosticism, and the Gnostic, and not all Gnostics are going to go here. Like I've talked to some Gnostics who are actually like intelligent people and have some balance. So what I mean by that is just take two basic premises that in a sense matter or the material world is an illusion that's created by a demiurgic figure. So where some Gnostics like don't fall into some of these pit traps is like there are takes where the demiurge isn't really this bad guy. The demiurge, yes, he created physical matter, and it's not as much of a prison, right? Because where I'm going with this is I'm going to be comparing the prison version of this to like their framework, but I'm just giving some of these people credit. They'll say that like instead of a physical matter be in the material world being like this prison that an evil god traps us in, that an evil creator traps us in, they'll frame it more like it's sort of like a womb state, an incubator. So like the fakeness of matter is necessary because we need distinctions to grow spiritually, so we can be unified back with the one, right? Because they have an idea the creator God is separate from the God that sort of is the one. Like the creator God is an aspect of the one, right? But the creator God comes in as a manifestation of the one, and where he comes in as like for the big light to be able to know himself and for creation to be fulfilled, the big light has to split up into all these little lights and come back together after knowing separation, distinct. Now, I still think that's a bunch of nonsense, but where you'll see other Gnostic cults go with this is the demiurge becomes evil and everything is fake. And the only way to get out of that is to have your gnosis, your secret knowledge. Essentially, what's going on is if you have a framework like this, where all these religious categories are fake, all metaphysics is just derived from mystery Babylon, and it's a bunch of occultists trying to like secretly initiate people and brainwash people. What you end up getting is Nimrod and this occultic network end up actually becoming the demiurge, and everything is fake. The only way you can have gnosis is if you end up repeating that narrative of history, and any deviation from that is going against the gnosis and pushing people back into the chains of the demiurge. And I've literally seen people go like psychotic over this kind of framework, getting into conspiracy stuff. So yes, so I went over a lot. I have more things I can pull up to like add meat to this, but I can go ahead and like let you guys interject because I wasn't expecting to talk that long straight.
Well, when you're talking about like Tammuz and Semiramis and Nimrod, I mean, isn't that basically the same as like the same archetype as Osiris, Isis, and Horus?
Yeah, it is. Say? It actually, yes. It ends up like bleeding into each other. So yeah, like.
So were those like contemporary kind of like archetypes or like mythologies? Did the like this Babylonian or like Assyrian, figures like precede the Egyptian, or did the Egyptian like precede the Babylonian? I mean, do we have like a timeline with that? Like where did that archetype like originate from, do you think?
Okay, so what I think that you're
I'm
actually
getting a
looking at
crazy
is
glare out of my window.
what I think you're looking at is okay, so you know what? I'm just gonna go into the Egypt stuff. And because so remember back to what I was saying at the beginning of my theory is, if there are primordial gods, and the primordial gods are based on aspects of how God reveals himself in Genesis, because he's part of my theory. I think that the first eight or nine chapters of Genesis, that would be after the flood, there would have been something similar that would have been an oral tradition, because like you have so many overlapping archetypes. You have so many overlapping archetypes in all these cultures. So I think when you're looking at early religions and you see all these overlapping archetypes, they all originate at the same time with the flood, but they are coming from different figures that emerge from different times of the flood. Then eventually, before the flood, then eventually, like during the flood, not during the flood, before the flood, you have these figures that are based on being deified after they die, and you have people coming up with cults about them. So what you're looking at is different people from different places interpreting that same source material in different ways. I think they're combining aspects of an oral tradition based on Genesis with bullcrap they're digging up. All right, so who's digging up? Let me get into this, because this is actually pretty interesting and also debunks some of these people's theory. So when you see the people running with this Mystery Babylon narrative on X, they'll repeat things like Nimrod was the first Mason. Nimrod's where all this stuff comes from. Well, we don't really we see mentions of Nimrod being a mighty hunter. We see evidence that Nimrod was like a kind of usurper figure. Right, but we don't really see much about him creating these occultic traditions. But where I think that comes in actually is Canaan. So in Genesis 9, you end up having Ham uncovering the nakedness of Noah. So if you go on to like the Levitical code, so I defend Mosaic authorship for all these books. Like there's people who like look at wording between Genesis and Deuteronomy, like, oh wow, look, you have this part of it was written in the exile period under the priestly tradition. This is the Yahweh's tradition over here. Well, one of the reasons why that whole theory on like Genesis being cobbled together and written together at different times, then redacted, then smashed together, like first of all, that's not how any books are written. But second of all, like they'll say like, oh well, you had these priestly traditions emphasizing this or that for this time period. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get rid of the fact that we have tons of fulfilled prophecies in there. All right, so because like, look, this happened after the Babylonian captivity, so therefore those prophecies must have been written after the Babylonian captivity, because we know that people can't predict the future like that, because we're a bunch of like naturalistic atheists, or we're theosophists who want to discredit the Bible so we can say our esoteric traditions are truth. Right. But like, if that was the case, you'd see mentions of like prophecies of Jerusalem, like, okay, I'm going to sanction this place is where we're going to have our temple. I'm going to sanction these people. You don't see any evidence of that. Like the only time Jerusalem is mentioned remotely would be like Salem, which would be where Melchizedek is, which I believe is Shem. And you'll see the place where Isaac was told to, or Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac. That would be the hill the temple was built on. But it's like there's so many ways that theory doesn't work. It's like if people are writing propaganda, like there's so many like internal things you'd expect to be different. And also like if you look at how Genesis and Exodus are written, it's written by someone who's very familiar with the crop rotation cycles at the exact time in Egypt where the writer was claimed to be. And whenever Genesis talks about like the Levant area, the Middle Eastern area, there's no familiarity with the geography there whatsoever, but there is tons of familiarity with like the Sinai Peninsula's geography and like Egypt's crop cycles, things like that. So I got on a little bit of a segue, but I just wanted to point that out. Because what I was getting at was like the dating of Genesis and stuff, and why I think all this comes from Moses. So yeah, back to what I was saying about Ham uncovering the nakedness of Noah. If you look at Levitical law, and if you grant that like this is the same writer, what it looks to me like is because Levitical law says, you shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, for that is your mother. Like uncovering the nakedness of your father is having sex with your mother or your stepmother, like your father's wife. That's like, because the point it's making is that like marriage is so intimate that like your spouse, your other half, is your nakedness, right? So what I think actually happened is Noah got drunk, then Ham raped his own mother because Noah was the patriarch of Earth. And so if you go forward, like I don't know how familiar you are with these Bible stories, but another time you see this happening is when Absalom overthrew his father David, King David. Absalom usurped King David. He ended up having sex and raping his wives on the rooftop in front of everyone. Like there's this kind of like caveman idea where ooga booga, if I take your woman, I'm like the alpha. So he's pretty much doing that to declare himself like the alpha and patriarch of the earth. All right. So then Shem leads the charge in covering the nakedness. I believe that's his mother, and then Japheth is following them. So what you get from that is you get Shem getting the priestly blessing for covering the nakedness of his mother. What I believe that is like he's pretty much like an archetype of Christ, and that's representing Christ covering the sins of his bride. So like him getting the priestly blessing is foreshadowing that. Then the reason why he's Melchizedek, or one of the reasons, is because Melchizedek was in Salem, Jerusalem, and Jerusalem would have been like the middle point between Africa, between like the Middle East and Asia and Europe. And you generally have the Hamites go south, like the Shemites stay in like that sort of Middle East region, and the Japhethites go north. Now they're all going to mix. Like when people say like, oh, Hamites are black, well that's a bunch of bull crap. Like I do think blacks are descended from them, but like I think a lot of the Southern Chinese and Mesoamericans are descended from Ham too. So like like they'll look at, oh well, they'll say there's a curse of Ham. So what I was getting at also, there is no curse of Ham. So Japheth and Shem got blessings. Because of that, Ham didn't get a blessing, but Canaan gets cursed. Canaan gets cursed. Why is Canaan getting cursed? So it looks, if you're reading that passage as if like, oh, well, this is Genesis chapter 9, therefore it all must be at the same time. Well, you got to remember when this was written, there were no chapter verse distinctions. But if you look at when blessings and cursings would be giving, Jacob would be giving his blessings and cursings to his son at the end of his life. So what I think there's actually like between when Shem covers the nakedness of his mother and between the time where you get the blessings and cursings, there's a lot of time that is passed on, because not all of Genesis is in chronological order. Like it goes back and forward in times for certain parts, like quite often. So this would have been towards the end of Noah's life. So because here's the thing, like if you go with that chronology where like it's early after the flood, and then Canaan would have been born. So some people will say Canaan is being cursed because he's the offspring of an incestuous relationship. I used to believe that, but I don't anymore. What I think it actually is that you will see this wizard type figure popping up all over mythology, like the black yoga. The black yoga is an example that's in like the India Pakistani region that gets into Indian religion. Then Krishna gets based on that. I think that's based on Canaan, and he would be this early like archaeologist, explorer, wizard archetype, and he's the one that's going around actually like uncovering all this this pre-flood Nephilim cult type stuff. And so then that ends up getting smashed together with because people after the flood, like early descendants, they're having longer lifespans, and then you got these like legendary figures back then. So at first he'll be starting reviving like these esoteric practices. So that's why I think he actually got cursed. And Ham did something bad, but that wasn't as offensive to God as what Canaan was going around doing. So when people say Nimrod's the first Mason, they're wrong, because it looks to me like that's actually Canaan. Like Canaan was this occultic wizard type archetype, and then actually it seems to me like when you see like parallel like stories about there being this usurper figure, like a lot of times he'll have this propaganda minister figure. That's who I think Canaan actually was. I think Canaan was actually Nimrod or Sargon of Akkad's propaganda minister, and he was the one like doing these plug and play games, like mixing and matching kings lists together. And it looks, so when you were asking like where did Egypt get the stuff from, it looks like they were doing it first, but these Hamites and Canaanites would have a presence in Egypt, so they were trading each other and I think they were mixing and matching propaganda with each other also. So like I think it sort of all like started coming up and around the same time, but then they branch off in different directions. They'd use similar methods, but do it at different times and things like that. But yeah, like, so I can start getting into, I want to show some examples, because I can go into the Assyrians kings list and show. So let me just say this: the Assyrian and Elamite kings list, it looks to me like there's less propaganda and bullcrap being put in it, because they get the dates for the flood right, and they end up like disproving like the Egyptian and Sumerians kings list, which I think are propaganda. Oh, one more interesting thing. So one of the reasons why in my hypothesis I was saying that like I think they're like smashing together a bunch of contemporary figures, making it look like there's a line of succession with so they can say they're much older than they really are. All right. Crap. I don't have this off the top of my head. But one of the there's a couple dynasties. I don't remember where the chronological order of it. I should have had the list pulled up and done screen share. But what you end up seeing is multiple dynasties all last about 70 or so years. And then like there's like 7 years of famine, something really bad happens, and there's some kind of centralization of power. You see that in Genesis with there being 7 years of famine, and you see 7 years of famine in these other timelines also. Like you'll see like this time of famine, and sometimes it'll be 6 years, because like it might hit different places. But yeah, like you see all these times of famine reflecting the kind of history that you see in Genesis. But in the propaganda kings list, you'll have like some short-lived dynasties, then they'll get sort of like, what I think happened is like these would have been different kingdoms, different kind of states. Then you have a time of crisis come over. You had a centralization of government, and then like all these different like smaller states be unified into a single state. And what they did was like they just took all those lines, smashed them together, made up a bunch of bullcrap propaganda about it, say we're old and everyone. And oh yeah, like we weren't taken over by these Hebrews who we completely look down on. And yeah, that's why I have all these different dynasties that seem to last as long and seem to end under the same conditions, which were allegedly like all happening like at different times. No, like those things were happening at the same time, and they were getting smashed together. Yeah, like that. Sorry, there's a lot going on there, but it's like I have so many reasons for what I'm saying. It's impossible to get into all of it in like just an hour, 30-minute space. Like I might have to do some solo videos just doing it more focused, but I do appreciate you like giving me an outlet to do this. But yeah, anything you guys want to interject with?
Sorry, what is a king's list when you refer to that? Is that like a historical timeline, or?
Yeah, a king's list pretty much refers to a line of succession. It'll list rulers, and it'll also like list their accomplishments and things like that. So you're going to have some kind of historical records in there. But like once you look into the Egyptian kings list and the Sumerian kings list, there's a lot of like contradictions and things that don't add up. But you don't have those problems with like the Elamite and Assyrians kings list. But the Assyrian and Elamite kings list ends up lining up with Genesis a whole lot more, which I think is pretty interesting.
Well,
Okay.
What I'm wondering, about Genesis, and we have all of the like his genealogy coming from Adam and Eve, but when Adam and Eve get kicked out of the garden, they go to the land of Nod, and it basically suggests that there were like people there, right, in the land of Nod. And so like who are those people, and like how does that maybe like relate to, you know, who comes afterwards, or where maybe some of these archetypes actually originated from. Like, are they like, you know, what was there, you know, people, political structures, things like that, like in this land of Nod that, you know, may have influenced, you know, who we read about in Genesis.
Yeah, so I think Nod would have been in southern Mesopotamia. Actually, do you have screen share?
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
How do I do screen share?
There should be a button that says present. It looks like a screen with a plus symbol on it. It should be under your display screen in the browser.
All right, I'm doing that because first of all, to answer that, like it's like I'm saying, if you're looking at that in a chronologic sense, where because it doesn't seem like it's clear to me, but I see why it could read that way, where it's like there's already other people there. It kind of depends on how you read it, but the way I take it is it's not chronological, and like early genetics wouldn't have been like as corrupt, because like if you look at the problems with incest, it's like there's always genetic errors popping up, but like incest ends up multiplying it. But it also says that like Adam and Eve had like many different daughters. Now, when it talks about them going there, it doesn't mention that in chronological order. That's what I think's going on. But hey, you could say that like for like Adam was the federal head for humanity, and like his creation Eden was emphasized there, but there were also like other people running around at the same time. It's like if that's your take on it, I'm not going to argue with that. I don't think that's what's going on, but that's, you know, I'm not going to say it's a impossibility either. Okay, so let me share the screen. Yeah, I was going to get into the Egyptian kings list because it starts off with gods and it starts getting into like let me see, Mike. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yeah, but like I can show. So yeah, I can show, because I have two ways to give an example of this. So I have one of them is a map, but another one is like the King's lists and how it's like based on a lot of these Genesis figures and stuff.
You can show us both, man.
Yeah. Okay, so here, all right, you see that map right there?
Pull it up right now for you. There you go. Okay, yeah. Okay, yes, okay. I've seen stuff like this before in like entertainment media and, you know, historical books, and okay.
All right, so yeah, like this, it looks to me like this is actually a whole map of Eurasia. So like what more like scholars will say is like, oh, this is just the Nile. Like you have all these boats over there. No, what it looks to me like is it's a map of Eurasia. They didn't really go as far into Africa. Remember what I said about like the Persian Gulf and Lagash being joined, like the land of Elam, which would have been the other side of the Persian Gulf, like near the Persians, and then Lagash being in Mesopotamia. So you have that being joined. It's like you can see the Tigris, you can see the Tigris and the Euphrates, and you see them connecting it to other water systems up there. It's kind of like they're saying, oh, well, it all must just sort of be like the same river, or just a bunch of bull crap. And you see a bunch of people on these boats. So then if you look over at this landmass, it's like, oh, what's this over here? Here's like a replication of what Eurasia would look like with lower water levels. There's a lot of similar shapes. Now there's some things that don't entirely add up, but like it looks to me like when you're around like the Mediterranean, when you're around the Mediterranean basin in the Middle East, things are definitely more recognizable with like the with the world map. And it's like the further south or the further out you go, it gets a little bit harder to recognize. But yeah, like that definitely looks like Siberia. And what's interesting is this, if you go over the far left, it looks like someone with a boomerang. It looks like someone with a boomerang, and like that's the kind of stuff that like we know people were having like over in this part of the world, which would be like near Polynesia. Now, is that Australia, or is that like some kind of continent that's now submerged or something? I don't know, but like it definitely lines up with like the kind of like artifacts that we'll find over in this region. But this is pretty interesting though. It's like, okay, so why are there a bunch of boats? Like what you'll hear scholars say is, oh well, because it's just about the Nile. Well, what I think is like you're looking at early humanity expanding outwards, and they're dominantly using water routes. So boats are representing different colonies. Okay. But here's something that's interesting. Here's something that's very interesting. All right. You see two altars. You see two altars. One of them has smoke going up from it, and another one doesn't. So what I think that you're actually looking at over here is you're looking at because if you go into Genesis 4, remember, like for both Cain, what Cain offered and his attitude, his offering was rejected, and his smoke didn't go up to God, and it was rejected. But then Abel's was offered. What I think you're actually looking at is you're looking at this would have been made by dominantly descendants of Seth, who would have been recognized as who would have been recognized as like the established priesthood. Because remember, like Seth begets Enosh, and Enosh means the priesthood is established. So when you're looking at like early Egyptian religion, words like Atum, like if you heard of Atum Ra, what I think is that's actually just straight up Adam. Like Adam is the first, like, you know, he's the first human, he's the progenitor, and he ends up getting deified. Then you look at Set, that's Seth. You know, I think that's Seth. And what's interesting is in the Genesis 3 prophecy, you have a prophecy that the seed of the woman will crush the seed of the serpent. Now, if that's reflected in oral tradition, they're going to be associating that with Seth, and the Sethites are going to be associating evil with Cain, and also just with the serpent, because they're going to know about the Genesis serpent, and that serpent gets deified or demonized certain things. So, in Egyptian mythology. So remember, okay, one more thing I want to say. This is found in Egypt. It's found in Egypt around 5,000 years ago. So it would be pre-flood if the Masoretic timeline is correct. It would be pre-flood. Okay, but so we have a lot of there's so many other pictures I could get into that back this up also, but I'm only going with this one. So I just want to add though that we don't really have the way people pronounce things in the inscriptions they gave or the explanations they give until like a lot of times 1,000 years later. So, you know, if you're looking at like Egyptology and stuff, you'll see people explain these kind of images and things like that, you know, based on you know, what the inscriptions say. I'd say that's like propaganda that gets added later, and it just ends up adding up. In fact, I have another picture that ends up backing this up too, that I can pull up on the screen share also. But I'm not even done like dissecting this. But yeah. So.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no. Yeah. Well, yeah. So back to what I was getting at with Seth, though. So you have the serpent, you have the prophecy against the serpent. Well, guess what? It is Set who actually is working for Ra, who I think would have been more of like a retcon of the word or the sun, you know. And I can actually get into this, the other image I'll be sharing. He's killing the chaos serpent at his behest. Now later on, oh yeah, so Tammuz and Osiris, that would be Abel. Remember what I was saying? Like Cain killed Abel. So originally, I don't think that you know, I don't think Osiris exists like as the kind of god he was. Now what I think happened is actually when you had Hamites and you know, people related to that start taking over, start falsifying kings lists, start spreading propaganda to legitimize themselves. It would make if they're associating with these like magic practices that they want to make into the state religion, well, they want to make the Sethites the bad guys. So that's why you end up having Set dismembering. So it's pretty interesting. It's dismembering. So it seems to me like Seth and Cain actually got mixed together into the evil Seth, the evil Seth who goes around like dismembering Osiris, and Osiris and Tammuz would both be based on Abel primarily, right? Like, so let me show another one though.
And Seth in Genesis is the son of Cain.
No, so Cain and Abel would be Adam and Eve's first two kids.
Right.
Seth would be the one after Cain killed Abel.
Okay.
And then it says they have more sons and daughters too. So like there's like people. Okay, one thing I want to say is like once you look into the Eustace Mullins narratives and some of these hold on, can you see me typing in? Like what's the screen look like when you're looking at me?
Yeah, I could see your Twitter, and yes, I could see what you're typing in there. Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Do you want me to hide it for a second?
No. I'm pulling something up. I'm just trying to remember the right word. Maybe if I hit latest, it'll come up fast.
Also,
there we go. All right.
Sorry, Mike, real quick. What was the name of the map or the graphic you just showed? The people in the chat would like to know.
Crap. I don't like it's on the tip of my tongue. It's something that begins with an N. And one of the problems is I found this on Yandex browser. It was on some Russian website too. Dang gummit. No, it's on the tip of my tongue. That's all right, man. I can. Yeah.
My bad. If you think of it,
yeah.
Let us know. Yeah, man. No, that's cool.
Okay, but here's another one. That I think is really interesting. So this would be more later, and I'm gonna be getting into like the genealogy with this a little bit. And by the way, like I plugged in what I did to show this because like there's no website that really has this stuff compiled. So I ended up giving AI inputs. I gave AI inputs to like mix together like the king's list and God's list that you'll see on Wiki, and then end up corresponding it with like what I see to be as biblical figures is based on. So I'll be showing that. So I just want to say like for the next thing since people are interested in sources, I don't have a source for that because like I programmed it into the AI to be like a visual aid of sorts. So I just want to get that out there. But yeah, so here you have look at how many people you have. You have 1, 2, 3. Then you have a dung beetle and a sun. Then you have 4, 5, 6, 7. Then underneath it is one person carrying a boat. Now, but later on inscriptions, it'll say, oh well, this is about the Nile flooding over, and you have a Nun. You have Nun, like he's associated with like the god of the waters, right? And he because this Nile, and there's this association. Then you have the beetle that's representing like Ra moving the sun across the sky, because he's said to be the god behind the sun that moves the sun across the sky, and like him rolling the sun across the sky as compared to a dung beetle. If you don't have a completely anti-biblical bias, it seems pretty obvious to me that like Nun, is pretty similar to Noah. That's Noah, and he's holding the boat because he built the ark. And then you have 7 people on there because like you have 8 people on there. And also it's like you can look at Chinese characters. If you just look up God in ancient China, you'll see some like Chinese linguists explain this. But like the Chinese characters themselves for boat like refers to water, flood, 8 people. Like it's straight like this story is like straight up in the Chinese characters. Is like specifically like the boat, 8 people is ingrained in like collective civilization's memory. So the conclusion I'm coming to is that like the history Moses recorded, because he would have had access to a lot of books in Egypt that we don't have access to anymore, and he also would have gotten divine revelation. So the conclusion I come to is that he was preserving the real history, and that these documents we have that predate him are bullcrap propaganda, and that's actually the accurate history. So then why is there a sun god? Now I think back to what Habsburg was asking about, like what came first, where did all this stuff come from? It seems to me like there was a gradual inversion. So like originally, actually what's interesting is like Atum Ra. He originally would have been like represented as a mouth. So remember in Genesis, like you have God created, then God speaks, and it was so, and you have the spirit hovering over the waters. So like the speaking God, it talks about God like actually physically appearing to people. Like Adam walked with God, Enoch walked with God, and in appearances we see of God, like rather it's the angel of the Lord. So remember, in the Old Testament we see appearances of the angel of the Lord. We hear about like him glowing and things like that. Well, like that angel bears the name of God, but if you see other passages, it says that God will not share his name with anyone else. So like that what you're looking at is you're looking at an uncreated being giving himself a finite form that can be discerned by people, and it would be glowing. So what I think happened is you had a combination of this emphasis on the word, all right, and then you had the one who comes down in the cool of the evening, glowing like the sun. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. That eventually that got symbolized and associated with the sun. So it makes sense why the sun would be associated with divinity. It's like the sun is fixed in the sky. You can count on the sun rising and falling, right? And like it doesn't wither or fade like geographic, like stones erode and things like that. You have crops wither and fail, but the sun's so like it's a symbol for eternity. So it makes sense that like it would be deified and associate divinity like that. But eventually it's like it just keeps on getting just all these like different like retcons, it keeps getting more imminent. It keeps becoming like less transcendent, more and more imminent. But eventually it becomes like we're like anthropomorphized, like all these gods have human forms and things like that. And if you look back at like early mythology, actually, like when you talk to people now, like they'll frame it like, oh, these ancient gods were immortal. Not early on. Like this is one of the reasons why I actually think they're based on Genesis like 10, 11 figures that had longer lifespans, is because like it talks about gods like actually like decomposing and things like that. So if you have lifespans rapidly decreasing and you have some people outliving like their great times 12 grandchildren, well, it makes sense to me that they're going to be seen as gods and eventually deified, after they die and things like that. But yeah, so so where you get the Eye of Horus from? It seems to me like the sun was the eye that was at the mouth, and it would be associated with God's omniscience. That eventually it just got like made this esoteric symbol. Oh yeah, also another, I'd say with the final inversion going from transcendence to immanence would be pantheism, and like this idea that like your mind can like connect the universe. Like if you go into your Dutch oven and think hard enough and do like these deductions, you can eventually like access the mind of gods. That's where you get like illuminism from. It pretty much goes from like God, monotheism to sun worship to this anthropomorphized mythology, then to worship of ideas, and eventually worship of intellect, which would be like illuminism. And it's pretty interesting because the Greeks don't have any original gods. Like the Greeks get their mythology from like the Egyptians and some of these like Indo-European steppe people, things like that. But like if you look at their chief gods, like they're based on idea, like Uranus, that would be like space. Kronos, time, Zeus, like the lesser heavens, the sky, it's because they saw like ideas as divine. They saw God as an idea. That's pretty much what Plato's World of Forms is about. So yeah, I'll need to go back and change what I'm sharing. Yeah, because I just moved the screen over, so I'm gonna have to change. All right. You guys can go ahead and interject. I'm going to make sure like everything's in order before I pull this up. Is there if there's anything you guys want to say?
Habsburg, anything? I'm good, man. I'm just listening.
Just letting you roll, Mike.
All right.
Oh, this is all cool. This is interesting shit.
Yeah, so like before I end up showing this, I just want to like cover a little bit of ground. So if the hypothesis that they have this they're getting their stuff from like mythologizing some kind of oral tradition that's based on the Genesis accounts that you see. If you do that, like, because so back to what I was saying about documentary hypothesis, and back to what I was saying about Genesis not necessarily being written in chronological order. If you read Genesis 1, it's focused on God's name Elohim, and it gives like a bird's eye view of creation. All right. But then once you get into Genesis, which the documentary hypothesis people will say, oh, well, see, like that's a redaction from another time. And like these come from different traditions that are then just sloppily cobbled together. Like even though there is just like a wonderful harmony between the two, it just doesn't make sense to be put together like that. But that's essentially what they say. But like there are differences though, because what you're looking at is like you're looking at one view of creation. Then for the second one, you're looking at a more intimate view of creation where like it's more focused on humanity, and that's why like you get the focus on the covenant God there, because he's like making Adam from the clay, breathing life into them. It's like you don't get that in Genesis 1. But yeah, so it's like, all right, if they're basing gods off this, what are you going to expect to look for? What are you going to expect to look for? So like you're going to have a spiritual creator, that'll be Elohim. You're also going to have, so remember, like in the beginning, God created the heavens of earth, but then there was like this formless void. What you actually see in these early religions is like this formless void actually being deified. Then you have the spirit on the waters. You have the spirit on the waters being deified as well. Then you have like, because remember, like the word is associated with light, like let there be light. All right, you have that being deified also. I was just going over that a little bit. So then later on when you start having Yahweh coming up, because it's using different like words for the same God, you have another God coming around. So you have a spiritual creator. Then you end up having another God making man out of clay and the dust. And the Egyptians end up like merging aspects of this, and they end up splitting it up. So and then because I'm not going to get into like the Babylonian thing, that would take way too much time. So when it comes to Horus, because you were asking about that, where Horus comes from. So Tammuz, the Osiris figure, I think that comes from Abel. So where does Horus come from? Well, like you have so Horus, he becomes this kind of he's known for going up to the sky. He's known for going up the sky. He's known for like having like close access to the chief god. And he's known for being a bridge from like one world to the other. And he's also kind of like this prophet figure, because like later on Thoth would actually be based on Horus, and like Thoth is like this messenger god that like Hermes becomes based on, and things like that. I'll tell you who that fits with. That fits with Enoch. Enoch's name literally means initiated one, like if you look at the Hebrew. And yeah, like if he's taken up in the sky and he's this prophet figure that's known for walking with the creator, it's like he's obviously not just doing this in isolation. Like he's going to be pretty famous for this stuff. And yeah, that's actually I think that he ended up getting deified and ended up getting like merged with the word or the light figure. All right, and then so you get Mesopotamian variations of this. It's like you have a Enki Enki is the god that like ends up breathing clay into people. That would be based on the Genesis 2 god. But then like you have Enlil. Enlil is like the bad god, but he's a spiritual one. And he's trying to judge humanity for like making too much noise, and oh my gosh, like your population's getting out of control, and oh my gosh, we're going to create these cycles of disaster to keep you in line, right? And things like that. You know, it's because you're gonna see like echoes of this, and like this merging and splitting up of different aspects of God and different figures, and then they end up getting merged with other figures. Like I think like, yeah, like I said, I think Enlil is based on Genesis 1 depiction of God. Then Enki would be a mix of like Enoch and also Genesis 2 God. And what's pretty interesting, this actually gets back into why I put the Tower of Babel much later. Okay, so this is getting a little bit off topic, but I will be able to tie this back into the King's List chart that I put together. So if you go to like I listen to audio Bible, so I don't always get the chapter verse right, but I think around like Genesis 13, 14, 15, you have these people from Sumeria, the Sumerian region, coming to attack the Amorites, and also Salem, which is where Melchizedek was being held. And you know, Abraham ends up going to war with them and helping the Amorites. So what's interesting is this would be like Azur's sin. So something sin. So I'm really bad at pronouncing these old names, but it seems to me like this would have been a remnant. This would have been like essentially the Akkadian Empire, and this would be like, because remember, Sin was deified. Sin would be the son of Canaan. He ends up being deified. So when you go over to Genesis 10 and it talks about Tower of Babel, it says it's made on the plains of Shinar. I believe that's being named for Sin, and then also it says Nimrod begat Cush. So it seems to me like Nimrod would be like, because it says like if you look at the Genesis 10 table of nations and like who's mentioned there and things like this, it says so and so is a son of, so and so is a son of, but when it gets Nimrod, it just says Nimrod begat. So it looks to me like Nimrod would have been a bastard child of Cush, and he would have had an affair with a Sinite woman who would have been descendant from Canaan. All right, and you know, so he would have been this person who would have felt disgruntled and slighted by society, and it talks about how he's a mighty hunter. So at this time, you would have had like Shem, Noah, Japheth, these people still alive. They would have been holding the peace. And after Noah dies, he probably saw an opportunity. He probably had Canaan, who was his relative, whispering in his ear because he was like a mighty man of notoriety. They were already like making legends about him. So it looks to me like he had a band of hunters and other young men who were like unsatisfied with life, felt slighted, felt disgruntled. So they pretty much had like the first Marxist revolution, like overthrow society. They took things over, made the first army, and it looks to me like Shem and Japheth, they were still alive, and they were pretty outraged by that. And that would have been the Akkadian Empire. Okay, so who takes down the Akkadian Empire? You would have had the Amorites who are working with Shem, who would be Melchizedek, but you also had from the north, there's these people called the Gutians. Look into the Gutians, or the Guti. They're described, a lot of times they're described as like blonde hair and blue eyes, but they definitely didn't have a written language. Like you have local Mesopotamians, like when they come in and conquer, they're complaining about how these people aren't like well known, don't really know our irrigation system that well, and our logistics is falling apart and we have a bunch of people starving. Well, like that fits with Germanic culture, and they because they wouldn't have a written language, it's like their religion and history was through song. So they'd be coming into a cod, they'd be mowing people down, just like the Vikings. It'd be like yo ho, hee ho, the blood, the fire, the ice, the snow, the boop boop boop, just killing people, getting drunk around the campfire. It seems to me like what was going on is you had Shem and Japheth pretty much getting together, going like, well, this is a monstrosity, and they might have had like this little plan to send like different waves in at different times. And the Amorites who would have been Hamites, they would have been cooperating with Shem, because it seems to me like when Noah set up that world order around Shem's priesthood, it seems to me like the Hamites were actually going along with it, and like Nimrod would have been the first one to like start overthrowing that. But what's interesting is Shem is associated with this shepherd priestly person, and Japheth is associated with like this warrior king. But like look at Ashra and Indra, and you have other examples of this. Like you have these two figures, one's a shepherd priest and the other is a warrior king archetype, and they end up having these differences, but they end up getting together to pretty much save the world. That's what, like when you look at those figures, I think what you're looking at actually is like a retelling of Shem and Japheth and their civilizational orders, pretty much like, hey, look, we don't want to let this like illegitimate thing get out of hand and pretty much like ruin the world. That's what I think. That's what I think you're looking at. Okay, so let me see if I can end up getting into this. All right, yeah. There we go. Okay, let me do the screen share coming up. Well, unless there's something that you guys want to interject, I can go ahead and let you guys say something while I set this up.
No, man. Oh, good.
Keep it rolling.
Gary, you got anything, Gary?
Deep thoughts from this guy.
All right, keep it rolling then.
All right, yeah. So this is from input. So remember, I was talking about atom. It sounds very similar to Adam, but this is also God. So yeah, like you have him coming from the waters. All right, he finishes, and this like atom ends up getting merged with Ra later on. But yeah, it's you have overlapping etymology. All right, so then okay, so pata. Think about that ends up becoming like the first Genesis 2 God who makes from the clay. Now this isn't in Genesis.
Sorry, Mike. You might want to just, can you zoom in just a little bit, because people viewing it might be a little small for some people, especially if they're on.
How do I do that?
You could do Control Plus,
or oh crap! How do I exit full screen without a?
Unless you're on a Mac,
escape.
Or you're on a
There we
Mac,
go.
you could use your.
So plus, let me try that.
Or you can go to like screen or view, and then it should say zoom in.
Plus, no. Zoom. Okay, there might be a zoom button. I'm really bad at technology.
Because you're in the. Are you on an Apple or?
No, I'm on a AMD Radeon or a Ryzen or RYZEN.
Is that with Windows?
Yes. Let me. I'm sure there's a way to zoom.
Yeah, it should be. It says hold Control and press plus.
Control and plus. There we go. Now is that more visible?
Yeah, there we go. Way better. Thank you.
Yeah. So okay. So remember what I was saying about Tubal Cain? He was the craftsman guy. He would have been well known. He would have been well known for like architecture and weapons, things like that. That's actually who I think like you get the Gnostic demiurge, the craftsman from, but also that would be merged with the variation of God from Genesis 2, because okay, so like I said, this detail wouldn't be in Genesis because you don't have God spitting on dust to make it into clay, but the idea would be like that he spits on the ground and he makes the ground wet to roll it into clay, and then you end up making that mold, and then you breathe life into that. So like think about if you're spitting like that's why it's ptah. It's the God who spits.
Okay.
But yeah, like that, it's pretty interesting, like how the etymology works. So then, what I was saying with like
in the cult of Ptah, like in Memphis, like the rite, the ceremony was the opening of the mouth ceremony. Like that was like that was like how they invoked Ptah, and like like the cycle of like death and rebirth is the opening of the mouth. Like so literally like.
Well, then another thing that ties into it, which like makes me think there might be something in some kind of oral tradition that might have like developed, that is when there's a couple of variations, because remember, like the Gospels are recording a lot of times the same events, but they emphasize different things. So some people will say, look, Jesus just waves his hand and heals a blind person here, but another time he makes like spits and rubs in their eye. Like, yeah, so it's like you actually have like Jesus doing something like that, and that's like symbolizing new life too, which that makes me think that the Egyptians are just like corrupting something that's like real. All right. Yeah, but then it's like, shoo, you have that's like a deification of the void that you end up finding. So like all since you have the screen, it's like you guys can look up all this. I was thinking about like pulling up the Wikipedia page where it's like I can click on it and get all the deep, but then it's because like if I do that, if I have a couple windows open, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to get lagged out for like what was happening when I had a bunch of windows open when I called and before the show started. So that's why I'm not doing it that way. So then Tefnut, remember, like I was saying, the spirit becomes feminine. So there you go. That's the spirit on the waters, and that also becomes a like, because remember, like the light, the let there be light, that would be like chronologically similar, like if like someone's recounting something and then like they're writing down an oral tradition, it makes sense that like you'll have the light being merged with the primordial waters, and that would become a goddess figure, because for some reason, I speculate on the reason for that, the Holy Spirit becomes feminized. So then then you end up having Geb, so these serpent gods. What's interesting is, the serpent in Genesis, he's, God doesn't want you to know. I'm going to show you the real truth. And then all these serpent cults, it's the exact same thing. It's like they're promising them kind of like esoteric knowledge. There might be a sense of apotheosis, like, oh, follow me, and I'll be able to share with you the secrets of immortality. Oh, one more thing. So because that map I showed earlier was in Egypt, it actually does look like both Cain and Set. It looks to me like Cain and Set, they both had a presence in Egypt. All right. So so if you think about this, it makes sense. Because it seems to me like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and where they get all these like magician ceremonies, a lot of it comes from pre-flood traditions. Why might that be? Well, if Cain kills Abel, he's living long. Well, he's gonna have that on his conscience. Like he committed the first murder. So what I think actually happened is toward the end of his life, they were already starting to like get into high culture, and they're like, oh wow, like we have high culture accounts of biblical history, because remember, like, Genesis doesn't really talk about the civilizations at all, but there's the same kind of human nature is the same. So like they're already turning, they're going to be turning to superstition, because they have like urbanization, prosperity, and that ends up like you end up having like atheistic or weird pagan tendencies with stuff like that more than you have in like rural places. So it seems to me like Cain was getting paranoid about dying. Then around the time he was dying, it's like you had these wizards come up and say, oh, well, if we do this, this, and this, then it's like, hey, you can be fine. So it's like if you look at like the Egyptian death ceremonies, it's like telling your soul and your heart not to like tell on the gods in the afterlife for you. And it's like, if God judges the heart and you fear judgment, well, that explains like the embalming ritual where like they take away your heart. And then also it's like, well, if you're afraid of going into some kind of judgment, then well, you end up getting instructions like here go through these ceremonies and you're going to reincarnate the right way. And if you miss this step, maybe you're actually going to be reincarnated with like 2 heads or a retard baby arm on your side, like literally like that. I don't have citations pulled up from that in there, but you end up seeing some silliness and stuff like that in like these Egyptian ceremonies. All right. So then remember what I said, though. Like Canaan would be the wizard figure. And if you have Babel happen, and you have like words, you can expect like K's and C's to mix up, like N's and M to sometimes mix up. But it does seem to me like Canaan would be this sort of wizard figure that's also merged with the God of Genesis 2. And so the Hamites who would have followed Canaan into this occultism, they're going to be the ones to end up deifying these Canaanites also, because the Canaanites were the ones going off into these weird cults first. And actually, it does seem to me like Sethites actually like went even further into the esoteric mysteries and with like Nephilim cults, because here's the thing: the Canaanites were making weapons, but they weren't like. So I do believe that like Nephilim are actually from like people doing rituals, make babies with angelic beings or demonic beings, and you have giant like there's actually obviously it's like maybe it's all fabricated because I've only read about this online, but it's like I have read about like multiple findings of like giant bones in places. Maybe it's all just made up, but it's like we have depictions of giants, and then if you look at mythology, it's like
true.
I think
what do you have? Okay, here's what you have there. Like so in Genesis 6, what do you have? You have sons of God taking daughters for wives, and they produce Nephilim. Then what do you have? You don't really have an the only counter example I can think of this might be Beowulf, but you don't have like female fallen angel or demon figures making giant babies from human men. You usually have, it's usually a witch. It's usually a witch who's bringing down some god or some demonic being. And you even have this in Beowulf too, because remember, like the final boss of Beowulf is a dragon who's like Beowulf going to this witch, fallen angel demon, and he ends up getting seduced by her, and they make a demon baby that's a dragon. But you have the exact you have like the opposite too. It's like Grendel came from like a demon and she was like a witch, but you always end up getting like this then with Greek mythology, it's like Zeus becomes a bull and ends up raping someone. So here's something interesting. You end up having the bowl of heaven coming up. So when you see it might be somewhere in this chart actually. If I get to the bowl of heaven, there we go. Bull, Hathor, so this I think comes from a pre-flood position, a pre-flood tradition where these fallen angels would have been because if you look at angels in the Bible, it's like they have some human characteristics, some animal characteristics. I think what this was actually like it was like a bull human hybrid, and it was straight up like having sex with women. Because if you look at depictions of the giants, these animal hybrids, like go to Göbekli Tepe, go to Egyptian hieroglyphs, go to cave paintings. Huh? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought I might cut out. Yeah, but go to all these things. What you have is you have these human animal hybrids, but they have massive penises and they look really horny. Like like yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence. So what I think happened is all right. So I don't have this chart laid out because this goes on like way more than each I consider to be Japhethites. Okay. Oh yeah. Then also it's like you'd have the storm god with Baal, right? Because Baal got is like the bowl of heaven, similar to Hathor, mixed with a thunder god, a storm god. Well, it wasn't thunder at first. Like the thunder would have won it. Thunder would have been when this went up north. But okay, what's this going up north? So what I think went up north actually is if you go to the book of Job. So Elihu the Tivite in the book of Job, if you look at the etymology, that is Esau's eldest son. Esau. So Job would have been the same time that Melchizedek, who Abraham met, probably a little bit after he died. Okay, so Melchizedek was Shem. There would have been need for a high priest. So why is Satan going to God to say, "Oh, is this man really upright?" Well, it's because this is the guy that God is choosing to be the high priest, and Satan wants to prove God wrong. That's what I think's going on. Because like once you get to the end of Job, Job ends up making atonement for like all those people there, and he ends up becoming king of king of an area that would be around like northern Saudi Arabia, southern Jordan, because if he's buddies with Esau's son, that's gonna be what becomes Edom. But what I think happened is he's sort of like the intermediary high priest between Shem. So he would have. So it seems to be like Job actually would have been the son of Ephraxed, who would have been the son of Shem. So Job would have actually been like a later descendant of a much earlier generation. So I think he was actually living longer because he had less genetic deterioration, even though he would have been born around a similar time to like Esau or his son. Because it does talk about like him living longer than other people at the time. And if that's going on, that's literal. Well, that kind of account of genetic deterioration from what I was talking about earlier would make sense of that. But anyways, where do you get this thunder god like Zeus turning into a bull, but he's also a thunder god? What I think's happening is at the end of Job, God appears in the whirlwind and the thunder. So what I think happens is word of that got out. It spread up north to Canaan and Turkey. Then that ended up getting smashed with the bowl of heaven, ended up becoming gods like Baal. And later on, you got Zeus, because that becomes a storm god. And you have Zeus also taking all these Nephilim characteristics, where he goes around and impregnates women to make like these demigod babies. But yeah, I actually think that goes back to like Job at that time, and like you're looking at another appearance of God being made into this kind of mythological figure that's not there. But yeah, so any interjection there? Because I gotta track a little bit, because I was trying to look for the bull god.
No, I'm good. We can go for another like 25 minutes or so. So yeah, keep going, my friend.
I mean, okay, I just qualify that, like, yeah, I mean, when you're talking about like the giants and like Zeus, making these like Nephilim, hybrid kind of, you look at like Hercules, or like, who was basically like a giant, like like the strongest person on earth, is like a human god hybrid, but like in like in North America, like there were like giant skeletons that were unearthed, specifically like in these Indian mounds. There's a lot of like historical records, in newspapers, from like the 1800s and things like this, of where people were, in North America were like discovering these skeletons of human or whatever, that were like 7+ feet tall. They were really like unprecedented, amongst like the native populations here. They didn't have people that were that tall, but there were like actual skeletal remains, and that's when you had like the Smithsonian was being founded, and that they were like usurping like these remains, and that they were like taking them into the Smithsonian collection, and like presumably they're still there, but there are like actual like hundreds and hundreds of like archived newspaper records from mostly like the eastern and midwestern United States, where it correlates with these mound sites where there were like actual like giant skeletal remains. I mean,
they have 6 fingers, and they have 6 fingers,
and red hair. Like they found actual like hair that had been preserved that was like bright red. Which was so not like.
That's how the giants in Kandahar were described that the U.S. troops ran into in Afghanistan. Also. Yep. But also like they're if fallen angels are often the animal hybrids, why do you have all like why are a lot of times giants like you have Yetis, you have Sasquatch, you have there's other ones in other areas, but it's like then like Journey to the West you have the Monkey King, like he's like this demigod that's like a hairy ape, like. It all just like adds up. It's like I can't tell you why they look like that, but like if that's going on, well, it seems like a lot of people record it, and it seems like we find evidence of this later remains. But of course, if you like look up AI, like fact check wrong, the Smithsonian debunked it. Well, yeah, that's because like it's because like the Smithsonian's doing the exact same thing that the World Economic Forum is doing in Göbekli Tepe. Like it's so. Oh yeah, one thing though I think's interesting. So like okay, you have a lot of references to Araratu, the Ararat civilization, and Anu. Anu would be so Nu right here. He's the god of the waters. Remember, and what they're going to say is, oh, it's just the Nile flood, and that's all it is. But in the Mesopotamian version, it's Anu of Araratu, and then there's like Nana. So Nana is supposedly like his sister, but but she's like credited as being like the like child rearer or midwife for all of humanity. It seems to me like that's Noah and his wife being deified. And eventually Nana gets merged with Sign. So here's what I think's going on with that. Nana goes from being like this midwife goddess to being Sign. Because remember, Nimrod is part Sinite, and he's taking over Shinar, which is named for the Sinites. So what I think's going on is him and Canaan are trying to suck up the Sinites, and this would be right after Sign died. So like, oh yeah, well, you know what? You guys are part of this royal line too. So we're gonna make him the moon god. That's actually that's what I think's going on with that. Like, and if you like, it sounds silly, but like if you understand human psychology, you can actually see how that would work and win those people over. Because what I think was going on is I think he was. It seems to me like a lot of those people actually left because like think about the etymology to like. Sign, Sin, Sino, Sinai Peninsula, Sign China. Seems to me like a lot of those people went to southern China, and even some of them would have gone over the land bridge and gone to Mesoamerica, because there's actually some interesting overlap in genetics between southern Chinese and like certain people in Mesoamerica, and that's why like you have these Olmec statues. So okay, so Nimrod would have been Kushite, so you would have Kushites in the regions, and Kushites produce Bantu, some of these black people. Then you go down to Mesoamerica, you have people with some of these like South Asian traits, but also some of these African traits. I think that the Sumerians became the Mesoamericans, and that's why they have ziggurats, and that's why like the Sumerians and Mesoamericans are literally the only two people in recorded civilization to have to practice living human sacrifice. And it's like you have overlapping god, like you have the serpent, the wisdom serpent, you have the sun god. It's like you have all the same kind of figures, but yeah, like it's funny. It's funny though, because like once I start, I can't show you all the things in the King's list right now because it's like that's way too pull up, and that it would be way all over the place. But like it's what once you like read between the lines, and you understand human nature, it's like you can actually think of some pretty funny but plausible scenarios for like, okay, why we're murdering these gods politically motivated? Yeah, but so another thing is, so Anu there's a variation where where you get the Anunnaki coming from the sky, and they're related to Anu, who'd be based on Noah. There's a variation where it's not a flood, all right? It's it's the ark comes down from the sky, but it's said to be on Ararat also, or Araratu. So here's what I think happened. I think they take these propagandists would take people to Mount Ararat, and they'd say, see, there's an ark on a mountain. Oh my gosh, yeah, there is. How did that get there? It must have come from the sky, so all our other bull crap must be true too. I can totally see it working like that. So then, yeah, remember when I showed you the 8 on the boat? Yeah. So what's really interesting is Herodotus actually mentions that, like, when he inquired the Egyptians like what their most famous pantheon was, there's the Ogdoad, but there's also a group of 12 gods. So the Ogdoad, that would be Noah, Shem, Ham, Japheth. But let me see if this was included in my inputs, because I put in a bunch of crap. Nope, it didn't include that. All right. Yeah, this is fast forwarding because I meant to just say a little bit on pre-flood and like early flood period. But there's another group of 12 gods. This would be around the time. Shoot. What's the guy's name? Man, I'm so bad with these other language names, but there is one god who, there's debate, not God. There was one pharaoh. There's debate on if he came before or after Moses. I think he came before Moses, but he was famous for trying to make Egypt monotheistic under Ra. So why would that happen? Well, okay, if you go to Genesis, Joseph goes down. He marries in with the high priestly line. All right. So it makes sense that at that time period, you're going to have pushes to monotheism. So what I think happened is this guy would have been a pharaoh right before the Israelites were put into captivity, and he would have been trying to reform things. So then like you actually have so when it comes to the group of 12 gods that's not included here, you actually have the Egyptians talking about how, like, once you betray these 12 gods, things start going downhill for Egypt. So what I think's going on there is, like, when I was talking about the kings list, they like had a bunch of these pharaohs who were only around for like 90 or 80 years or so. Then they all decline when you have like this 11 years of famine. Part of what I think they're doing is like filling up missing gaps of history to like remove record of the Israelites being there. And I think there's actually, I used to disagree with this. I used to think that the Hyksos were Canaanites, but Hyksos had a very prominent role over Egypt if you look at Genesis. And then, okay, what I was thinking is one of the reasons why I was thinking might be Canaanites that are the Hyksos is if you look at Genesis, it's calling Egyptians one thing, but like it never calls Pharaoh Egyptian. So that means that Pharaoh must be something else. Why is that? Well, actually, Egypt would have been like multi-ethnic, and the Coptics would have been the newcomers. So what I think you actually had going on is you had the Coptics start centralizing things in certain parts, and then once you had the famine, it's like they had the storehouses, and the Coptics and the Israelites kind of partnered and came to prominence. But then eventually, like, the Coptics and other Egyptians would betray the Israelites and put them in captivity. But yeah, like, I used to think it was Canaanites, and I don't have time to get into all the evidence that I see for this, but there is some interesting etymology going on there. But yeah, it seems to me like the 8 gods are based on the 8 survivors of the ark, and the 12 gods would be based on the descendants of Israel, essentially. Because they were all taking prominent position. And also, it's like, if you compare the lifespans, it's like those people descended from the Israelites, like they were living around like 120 years back then. But if you look at the Egyptians, they were like at most living to about 70 years old. So it's like, hey, wait a second, why you're living so much longer than us. Oh, you must be gods. Like that's another thing that can make sense. I already went over that. Yeah. So then Isis, remember what I was saying about the morning of remember what I was saying about the morning over Tammuz? You see a lot of overlap with these figures going back pre-flood, but you're not going to see that with like supposedly like Semiramis or Ninus, who's supposedly Nimrod, a bunch of bull crap like that. There's no evidence, and there's no evidence. There's not even evidence. I'm like, if you talk to these people who push the Bill Cooper and Alex Hislop theory about Mystery Babylon and like, oh, the Catholic Church. Because here's the thing, like if you follow the logic of Hislop where the Catholic Church gets all the stuff from paganism, that's going to knock out Protestantism too. Like Protestantism can't be true. And now one thing I want to say is like, one of the reasons I came across this stuff is because like I was like, hey, I believe the Vatican's involved.
Sorry, Mike.
So when I was posting, I'm like,
sorry, Mike, you cut out there.
Out of context.
You cut out there. You glitched out there. Yeah, you're good now. But when you started saying, I think you were saying you believe the Vatican is involved in. I think that's what you were saying. I could be wrong.
No, I was saying the Vatican's involved with conspiracies, but it's like with the toxic internet environment, it's like there can be a debate bro culture where it's like, yeah. Here you Catholics, I'm gonna post this stuff to dunk on you. Like here's Alex Hislop, and like I had some Catholics come to me say like, hey, you know, there's a lot of misunderstandings here. You know, this is saying that Baal was a sun god and that these sun gods are based off Nimrod, but it's like there's no proof that sun gods came from Nimrod, and there's no proof that Baal was a sun god to begin with. Like that's how sloppy the scholarship can get. Like all these chief gods or high level gods, they get lumped in with Nimrod. Then even though there's no evidence of them being sun gods, you have people on X who end up following these people, like just repeating it. And I was in the echo chamber for a while, but eventually it's like I was like, hey, you know what? I'm actually going to listen to you Catholics, and I'm going to investigate this. Sure enough, they were right. I looked for primary source. I couldn't find anything. What's like Baal being a, and look through the truth or space on X. Look at how many people are going to call Baal a sun god. It's ridiculous. There's no evidence for it whatsoever, but they're going to say it with the utmost confidence. Like back to what I was saying, ISIS is associated with Osiris, and you know, if Abel's murdered, and that's like the first travesty, and then also you have like mentions of Abel's blood crying out for vengeance, and also like if there's this idea of the resurrection, well, it makes sense that after a game of telephone, you're gonna have people slowly deifying that, and they look at the seasons, be like, oh my gosh, like yeah, like the seasons, the stars and seasons are given for signs, but then like instead of like letting it point to what I'd see as a prophecy of Christ, they end up like inverting it to be based on legendary figures that have already come and gone. So like you get this like constant cycle of dying and rising gods instead of like the rising seasons and the solstice and things like that pointing to like the death and resurrection of Christ, which I tried to say like the stars and seasons are meant to point to from a Christian worldview. Yeah. So then, so that goes, this goes to what I was getting at with Horus, but I've already covered that. There's the bowl of heaven. All right. So there's actually some, I didn't get this when I was talking about Hammurabi being, the Tower of Babel being built under Hammurabi, but so remember what I said earlier. So this Amun there could very well be a variation of Ham. It seems to me like Amun didn't even come until post flood, and Kemet, like Hamet. It seems to me like that's being named after either land of Ham or Ham's wife, because like sometimes when you would refer to people's wives, et would be added to the end, and it seems to me like Ham's wife was probably actually buried in Egypt, and that might be why it's named after. But also it could be called land of Ham, and if you look at the Bible, like Egypt is often called the land of Ham also. So either one of those could probably work, and the etymology actually fits, especially like if you look at how how that can overlap. But yeah, so back to what I was saying though. About Hammurabi. Hammurabi also just means Ham is great, Ham is king, and he would have been an Amorite. So remember what I was saying about the Amorites overthrowing the Akkadians. So I was about to get to this, but I have so much in my mind that it's hard to get through all this. So after the flood, you're going to have an ice age. Then you're going to have smaller floods come after that when the ice age ends, and that is why in certain places you have myths of there being like secondary floods or smaller floods that like take away mountains, and then the mountains become islands. Especially when you go over to like the India region, where it's like you had a lot of people like living on these islands, and they kept getting pushed into India. But then while that was going on, like they formed languages and cultures, and that's one of the reasons why like India has so many different languages and cultures. But they around then, since they were pushing back the dates of the flood, and they were trying to legitimize themselves. Because remember what I was saying about Mesopotamian religion? It's like things are fatalistically determined by the stars, and God is a bad guy. He's displeased with like you people's activity, because one of the reasons for the flood in there was too much noise and overpopulation. Like literally, this is where like Theosophy and the United Nations gets their depopulation cult stuff from. Like they're reading these like ancient Mesopotamian bull crap, and they're like, wow, there's something to this. So maybe we like need eugenics. And yeah, like these guys would come up with like abortion cults and like the proto trans surgery, like cutting off penises to make eunuchs and stuff, to like pretty much like practice eugenics and stuff like this. But one of the things they were saying is that the flood, this is a 600-year cycle. So if the flood happened around 2600, and Hammurabi would be around the 1700s, and that actually seems to me when the Tower of Babel happened, it would have actually been the same time that the famine was happening, the famine was starting. Joseph's famine in Egypt. It would have actually been around that time. And the reason for that is you can see in these ancient texts, like them talking about these 600-year cycles. Eventually that would be like, when that doesn't come, it gets blown up to 1200, and eventually like you get that's where the dates for like the Mayan calendars come also, for like why the world's going to be set to end. Because it's like, it doesn't happen, keep pushing up the date, because like they think everything's fatalistically determined by like these cycles. So yeah, and there I'm not saying there aren't any cycles, but it's like a lot of the reasons why I have a lot of these far-fetched dates is because like these people notice some of these patterns, but they make inferences that they can't prove. And then when that doesn't happen, it's like, oh well, maybe like just like when people predict the second coming of Jesus or the rapture, and it's like, oh well, I got these things wrong, so let me change it. Or also with QAnon, like Q said that Donald Trump is going to be reinstated on March 17th. 2021. Oh, that didn't happen. Never mind. Q meant March 25th. And
right.
Yeah.
Never mind. Yeah. Wait a minute.
Yeah. It would have been the exact same thing. Yeah. So then here's what I was saying about Toth. So Toth would have come later. It seems to me like Toth would have been like a merger of Enoch, and also Enmarker too. So one of the things that you'll see people say Nimrod is, one of the popular theories about Nimrod is Nimrod was Enmarker. And the reason for that is because if you go on the Mesopotamian kings list, Enmarker is the third down. And there are some areas in which Enmarker does overlap with Nimrod, but what they're assuming is they're assuming Ham is king 1, Cush should be king 2, then Nimrod be king 3, and that lines up with Enmarker. But like Enmarker, N refers to priests, and like Enmarker is credited as being the one to invent written language. So actually, like I think this is a pre-flood figure, and like if you look between like the etymology of Enmarker and Mercury, there's actually some like overlap there. So it seems to me like Thoth and Mercury be in part based on this guy who would have invented or would have been credited with inventing written language. And also if you go with the Masoretic timeline, Enmarker would have been between 5,300 years ago and 4,700 years ago. That's way too early for the flood too. But like a lot of stuff, they'll go ahead and claim that up. Enmarker is actually Nimrod. Yeah, but you said you wanted to end this, and Brett. So is there anything else you want to add? Because I already covered pretty much everything major.
If there's anything else you want to add, if you want to take like another 5 minutes, but I mean, if you think we're good here, we can wrap it up now.
Well, yeah. So pretty much what I wanted to do. So I plan on next time getting more organized, like maybe actually pulling up myths to get into, because part of what I was doing is I wanted to go off the top of my head and maybe just have this table to go on. But it's like I kept on thinking about more and more things like, oh, what about this? This is how it relates to this. This is how it relates to this. But it's like it got a little bit all over the place. It's like I hope I was able to tie everything back in and make it make sense. But it's like there's so much going on that's like related to all this. So it's like if I'm going around saying things like, oh, well, I think Tubal Cain was based in Lagash, it's like I have more reasons for saying that, which I can't get into because it's like I don't have everything pulled. But yeah, like that next time I might do it more organized like that and like focus on specific things, because it's like if you look at these kings lists and like you compare some of them to Genesis, and that's like the ones that line up with it more, you don't find as many logical holes. But then let's like you start comparing those ones to like the Egyptian kings list and the Sumerian kings list, it's like you can straight up see like, okay, I can tell you're making something up there. I don't know what it is. And then like once you start looking more into like the biblical records, extra biblical records, it's like you can start like saying, oh wow, like I can see why the ruling class would have interests in lying about and covering up this and this over here. Yeah, it's just it's something that I've been thinking about since 2022 when I started like looking into some of like Bill Cooper and Alex Hislop's claims. And what I want to say is that like the reason why I started going down this line of investigation is because I was approaching this research from the position of an echo chamber, where it's like here's the gurus that know everything and have exposed everything, like Bill Cooper. So I'm going to go with what they're saying. Oh my gosh, these Catholics pushing back against it. Well, hey, I know the Vatican did these bad things, so of course they're going to want to cover and lie for it. It's like, no, it's like even if you think people might be wrong about certain points of doctrine or history here and there, it's like that doesn't mean they're going to be wrong about everything else. It's like if you're one of these Protestants that's convinced the Jesuits run everything or something, you're still going to want to listen to Catholics. It's like, think about it from this. It's like you have blind spots. You're gonna believe some BS too. Like just be honest with yourself. So Catholics, even if you think the Catholic position is wrong, Catholics are going to have reason to want to look for holes in those criticisms. They're going to have every reason. So it's like you don't want to be in an echo chamber. You want to find accuracy. Well, you're going to want to factor what those people have to say, right? Like that's kind of where I'm coming at this from and what I want people to take away from it too.
Totally agree with that, and I actually really appreciate you adding that, because that's something that we take seriously here on the show, and it's something that I worry about in my research, not just my research, but just when I pull up any social media and see all the crazy talking heads that are out there. Yeah, you got to watch yourself. You got to be careful. You got to back check, recheck. And definitely don't just take one person's word for it all the time. These personalities kind of drive people to kind of cling on to them in the sense that that's the main person I listen to, and their word is kind of more golden over the other people I might listen to, and yeah, you just kind of gotta keep an open as an open mind as you can. I think
that's why I compare it to a cult. Like, because if you have this framework where everything other than this narrow framework I get from these people is false, and how I know that? Well, I know these people are right because look at how profound this is. Look at how well everything fits. That's like religion. And if you look at how that's like religion, and like if you're religious, if you're a Muslim and someone attacks Muhammad, it makes sense that they're going to take it as a personal attack, or a Christian, if someone insults Jesus. Yeah, but like if someone's going after the ideas of someone, you see people on social media having the same exact knee-jerk reaction. It's like no matter what you say, no matter what point you bring up, we're not going to go there. Guess what? How am I able to pinpoint this? Because I've been there, and eventually I was like, you know what? I don't know it. This person doesn't know everything. You know what? We're all just humans, so why don't I like listen to the people who would have every reason to want to find errors with what I'm saying and like get my head out of my ass, essentially.
Fair enough, man. Mike King, I appreciate the words you say and the reasons you have to say them. Before you go, man, can you let everyone know where they can find you and any of your work?
My ex, Mike the King 1517. Then I have my YouTube link there, but my YouTube just goes by my name, but it's like my first and last name are so common that like you're not gonna find it. Actually, just look up Michael King Medici Mafia or like something like that, and it'll come up. And yeah.
Cool. Right on, man. Well, we'll be in touch, and yeah, we'd love to have you come back.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me on too.
Okay, all the
Thanks,
best,
Mike.
friend. Take care, buddy.
All right, take care.
Well, man, that was great. Hadsburg, thank you for being here. Thanks for navigating the ship with me. Before we go, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you on social media, man?
My Twitter page is at accountable to me, Habsburg Jolly West. That's Gary.
Where can we find Gary?
Yeah, he makes his appearances now and again. You know, so keep up with the latest with Gary. But yeah, it's food time for him, so he's just a little anxious. But okay. It was cool. He made it onto the feed. So.
Yeah, anytime he can come on anytime. Well, thank you, and thanks to all the listeners, viewers, subscribers. We are happy to say that we have kind of reached the first tier of monetization on YouTube now. I just applied for it, so we should be able to get super chats next time during the next show. So if anyone feels like they want to check that out, that will be an option. So that is great. We have some awesome shows booked over the next couple weeks. We got Ryan Dawson coming back. We have myself and Hadsburg's coming back with Adam from the Truth Desk and William Ramsey on the 16th. On the 13th, we are going on JJ Vance's show. On the 19th, we got Crow 777 coming on. Yeah, and a bunch more that I just haven't finalized yet. So yeah, it'll be a great month. So yeah, everyone stay tuned. Please subscribe, obviously, to the Divulgence podcast on YouTube and Rumble. If you don't have a Rumble account, I suggest you make a Rumble account and subscribe. There's a lot of other good content there that some people just don't go to YouTube anymore because you could do a lot more on Rumble, say what you want, do what you want. And make sure to check out the links in the episode descriptions, because we are affiliated with Scott Horton Academy. You can go to scotthortonacademy.com/divulgence to check that out and get a discount. And also, we are affiliated with Ollie Demigard. So please check out the details in the episode description. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and take care until next time. All the best to you guys. Thanks again, Hasberg.
Thanks,
Peace.
buddy.